Okay, I'm going to walk you through creating your first Java program, the Hello World program. Just so you see what's in front of me here, this is Eclipse. This is our IDE that we installed. We've got a couple of windows up here, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But so far, I don't really have anything open. So what we're going to start, and this is generally the way that I like to create projects, is we just go to File, New, Java Project. And the place where this project is going to live, this happens to be where my current workspace is. Maybe when you started Eclipse, it asked you where to save your current workspace. Of course, this can be anything and will be different on your computer. Let's type in our project name, which we're going to call Hello World. You'll see here the JRE that we're using is Java 1.7, and we don't really have to worry about, generally you shouldn't really need to change that. In terms of the project layout, we're actually going to use a project folder as the root for the source and class files. This is just a little bit easier. If you have large projects with lots of different source files and lots of different class files that get generated, you might use the second option, but for now we're just going to keep it simple. We're going to go next, and this is, these are some other options here, but these all look good to me, so we're just going to go finish. And now we have our Hello World program right here, but we don't have any code in it, so we actually need to add a class. And if you don't know what a class is, that's okay for now. We'll touch on that later. But basically, everything in Java is a class, and so we need to, in order to create our program, we're going to add one. We're going to go New, so I just right-clicked that, New, and then we're going to add a class. And this class is we're just going to call it the same thing, Hello World. And it's going to have our public static void main. And that is basically our public static void main. Again, it looks like that's pretty complicated, but it's actually just the entry point into our program. That's sort of how Java knows where to start executing your code. Sort of like it's the entry point. So we're going to say finish. And there it is. And here we see our class. You'll notice that it's already created a bunch of code for us. This is the kind of thing that IDEs do. We could just do this in a text file, but we would have to write all this. So it's just a little more convenient sometimes. And notice here, just before we write any code, this thing here, this comment is called a Javadoc, and this is where basically this allows you to put in some comments that describe what this method or function is going to do. And it's nice because you can actually generate documentation automatically using these Javadocs. So we're going to say this is our first Java program, Hello World. Okay, that's just describing what it is. The Javadoc has these 2 stars here. If we didn't have this second star or asterisk, it would just be a normal comment. Okay, and I'm going to say the author. And you'll notice you can see that this is a specific tag that is a Javadoc tag, and you see Eclipse is recognizing that. So we're going to put in my name. And then this doesn't take any parameters, so we're not going to worry about that. But the since field we're gonna change, and it is 04/23/2013. This is just a date field. It's nice to date things. Okay, so let's look at this. So notice this is just another comment, but it's inline comment, so it's a colored green instead of the blue up here by Eclipse. So we're just going to delete that. This is where our code's going to be. So these public static void, these are basically identifiers for this method, which is called main. This method takes certain arguments that are of type string, and actually takes an array of them, which is why we have those things. Again, if this is all very new to you, don't worry. You don't really need to know all the details about this. I'm just sort of pointing it out so you can recognize it as we go along, and I'll try to do that in the other solutions as well. So in order to print something to the console, we use the system.out, and you notice here that Eclipse is actually popping things up. And again, this is a nice thing that an IDE will do for us. So we see that out allows us to to print something like this, and then we're going to go print line, right? And it tells us what this function does, or what this method does. We're going to select this. Again, you can really do this without the mouse. So you just type system.out.println, right? And here, again, it's filling things in, but we can just say hello world. Okay, now you'll notice here that it's giving us a little red thing. It's got a little X here, and so it's actually telling us exactly how to fix the error. It says insert a semicolon to complete block statements. So we do that, and now it looks good. We're going to save it. Save. And now we're going to run. And there we are. Here's our console, and we have hello world, our first program. Just so you can be confident that we haven't done anything too crazy, we can say hola world, and do the same thing, right? We can say, if we want to do something else, we can give it a little accent and say hello world. You can do lots of things. So this is basically just our first project, and I just want to show you one other thing that is useful in Eclipse. So I'm going to go to Preferences, and again, if you're in a PC, it might be slightly different, but in the General tab and the Editors and the Text Editors, you'll see the tab width is 4, and that's often a good width. That means 4 spaces per tab, and we're going to insert spaces for tabs, and this ensures that your code looks similar on your machine and any other machines. It's a small thing, but it actually is quite useful. And another thing that's useful is we're going to show the print margin at 80%, at 80 characters, and that's to prevent your code from getting too wide. Sometimes if you have, there's our 80 character margin there. You don't really want your code to be much wider than that, because just in general, if someone else wants to look at it on a smaller character editor with smaller width, it makes it easy. So you don't want code going all the way, hundreds and hundreds of characters wide. That's just sort of a general convention. The code isn't going to change if it's wide, but it's just a little formatting thing that I like to adhere to. Also keep in mind that in Java, for the most part, white space doesn't matter. So we could have that, we could tab it in like this, and it's fine. It does exactly the same thing. That's not the case in other programming languages like Python, although it is generally the case in sort of more traditional languages like C++ and C and Java, which is sort of descendant of those languages. So just keep that in mind, that in Java, white space doesn't really matter, but it does matter because it sometimes makes things easier to read. So if we had this, if we change our program so it looks like this, make some bad formatting things, right? So we could do that, and that doesn't change how our program works at all. But what it does change is how readable the program is. This is just a lot harder to read, right? So it does the same thing. So it's just good to keep in mind when you're writing code that even though it may not matter in terms of how the program runs, a lot of programming is writing code for you, and especially the future you, and especially other people who can read it. So style and comments, and we'll come back to that, is pretty important certainly when you're writing Java code, and really when you're writing any code. So I think that does it for today, and good luck in your next projects. Bye.